And good evening to a special council meeting of the Alpine Shire Council on the 9th of April 2024. Present tonight we have myself, the Mayor, John Forsyth, Councillor Katarina Hughes online, Councillor Ron Janis, Councillor Sarah Nicholas, and we have apologies from Councillor Prime, Councillor Kelly and Councillor Keeble. Also present are the officers, the CEO, Mr Will Jeremy, the Director of Customer and Community, Helen Havercroft, and the Director of Assets, Mr Alan Rees. Item 1, recording and live streaming of council meetings. Thank you, Mr Jeremy.
All council meetings are filmed with both video and audio being recorded. The reasoning behind recording council meetings is to hold us more accountable and improve transparency of council's decision making to our community. The full meeting is being streamed live on Council's YouTube channel, which is Alpine Shire Council, and will also be available on the YouTube channel shortly after this meeting.
Thank you. Remain seated tonight. Alpine Shire Council acknowledges the Taungurung peoples as the traditional custodians of the lands on which we are meeting today. Council also acknowledges all of the traditional custodians on the wider lands of the area known as the Alpine Shire. We also acknowledge those people who have contributed to the rich fabric of our community and strive to make wise decisions that will improve the quality of life for all. Apologies have already been mentioned. Declarations by councillors of a conflict of interest. Are there any conflicts? Thank you. We've retained a quorum. Okay, the presentation of reports by officers. The Chief Executive Officer, Mr Will Jeremy, please. 5.1.1.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report relates to a request to include an addendum report to incorporate on the title of the land to be purchased in Toowoomba South an additional carriageway easement in favour of the existing landowners. So I'm seeking to introduce this as urgent business during the special council meeting under clause C 2.6 of the governance rules. And the governance rules state, unless all councillors unanimously agree either at the meeting or in writing prior to the meeting to deal with any other matter, only the business specified in the resolution or written notice is to be transacted. So outside of the meeting, I've received written confirmation from the three councillors who are apologies this evening that they're willing to consent to this item being considered at the meeting. So tonight I'm seeking the support or the consent of the councillors in the room and online for this to be added to the meeting. So the recommendations tonight are that council considers an addendum report at this meeting to consider the additional carriageway easement across the right-hand boundary in addition to the rear of the land. This item was not included in the original addenda but is considered urgent business to allow the Chief Executive Officer to sign the contract of sale. And the second recommendation for noting the late inclusion of this report is in accordance with Council's Governance Rules, Chapter 3, Part C, Item 2.6.
Do I have a mover for this, please?
I move that.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Nicholas, Councillor Janis. Any?
Nope.
No comments?
No comment.
Thank you. That's been carried. Oh, sorry. Those in favour? Thank you. That has been carried. Now, Mr Jeremy, you can move on to your urgent business, please. 5.1.2.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So this report relates to the purchase of land fronting the Kiwa Valley Highway in Toowoomba South. I've provided background here, but the key thing is in the August 2023 Ordinary Council meeting, resolutions were carried by Council that gave this CEO the delegation to move forward to commit Council to purchase of the land. Importantly, Item 3 in that resolution, or Resolution 3, said the commitment was in developing the subject land to maintaining carriageway access to the rear of the remaining land, generally in accordance with the attached Toowoomba South Amenities Preliminary Concept Plan. And that was the basis on which Council gave consent to the CEO to move forward. Subsequent to that, the landowners have reverted and they've requested an additional carriageway easement to be included on the plan of subdivision. And that is, in addition to the easement to the rear of the land, is an additional easement which passes through the right-hand side boundary of the plot as you're looking at it from the Kiwa Valley Highway. So the reason that the landowners would like to include this additional easement is to facilitate the orderly development of their land. Now, we haven't seen an application for a permit, so we don't have certainty on how their land will be developed, but they would like the opportunity to have vehicular access through the right-hand side boundary of the plot, in addition to the rear boundary of the plot, in order to avoid having to seek approval from Vic Roads, we believe, for an additional carriageway easement onto the Kiwa Valley Highway. So the key considerations from my and my team's perspective are, does this additional carriageway easement in any way constrain council's ability to develop the block of land in the way that's proposed, which is for public amenities, car parking and access down to the waterfront, potentially in the future. And we've established that it doesn't significantly constrain the land, and we agree with the principle of trying to minimise the number of carriageway easements crossovers onto the Kiwa Valley Highway. So the recommendation tonight, based on consideration, is that council notes the negotiated price, which we've been able to confirm now that the survey of the land has been complete, based on the land area being confirmed as 1,168 metres squared, commits in developing the subject land to maintaining carriageway access across both the rear and the right-hand boundary of the subject land as viewed from the Kiwa Valley Highway, and noted in the draft plan of subdivision, which is attachment 5.1.3 to the report, and authorises the Chief Executive Officer to sign the contract of sale. And for further clarification, the reason this is being brought tonight as an item of urgent business is simply to allow the process of subdivision of the land and contract of sale to proceed to a conclusion. If council was not supportive this evening, the implication is that we would have brought it to the April meeting, and it would have just resulted in a further delay in getting this process moved forward to resolution.
Thank you. Have a mover. Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. A seconder, Councillor Janus. Councillor Nicholas.
Yeah. Mr. Jeremy, just in case there are people listening who might be interested, could you explain what would be the reason why minimising crossovers onto the highway would be good?
Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. So running across the front of this parcel of land is a shared trail that runs along the Kiwa Valley Highway. So that shared trail is used by cyclists, by walkers, runners, people with pushchairs. So it's good practice to minimise the number of crossovers, because every time you introduce a crossover, particularly over a shared trail, you introduce the risk of collision between vehicles entering and exiting the freehold land across the crossover and users of the trail. So where possible and where it's practical to do so, we do try to minimise the number of those crossovers to limit the number of potential points of interaction and collision between users of trails and vehicles which are accessing the freehold land.
Thank you.
Good. Any further questions? Councillor Janus.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor and Mr Jeremy. So by having access through there, will that potentially devalue the land? But we're intending, hopefully, to purchase.
Thank you, Councillor Janus. That's a great question. So from my perspective, every time you impose an encumbrance on a parcel of land, you potentially do devalue that land, because it does constrain further the way in which that land can be used. So the question in this particular case is to what extent that additional encumbrance would devalue this land. And we've looked at what was council's intent in developing the land, and it was to establish public amenities, it was to establish car parking, and to provide the opportunity for a future access down to the river. And we don't believe that the introduction of this new crossover or this new carriageway easement reduces or significantly constrains council's ability to deliver the outcomes that it was seeking to achieve on the land. So in that respect, from council's perspective or the community's perspective, it won't change the way in which the land is being delivered. But you're right, the introduction of a new constraint on the land does have an impact on the council's ability to develop that land. So it does present a constraint on our ability. We need to maintain into perpetuity the right for the current owners to access across that right-hand side boundary.
Mm. And have the other, I'll call it the other party, have any conversation in reducing the cost of the land to council?
Thank you, Councillor Janus. We have not had a conversation with the owners about a reduction in the purchase price of the land as a result of the introduction of the new easement.
And I know we haven't seen any plans at all how they're going to develop the land there, but they potentially will then be using our access point, not ours yet, but anyway, the access point there to service a X number of residential housing or whatever goes in there. We haven't seen any plans of that. And the thing that concerns me is that the tight turning into and out of that subdivision and the impact on traffic movement in and out of that shared piece of driveway. Have we had any engineering on that at all?
Thank you, Councillor Janus. That's another good question. We have done no detailed engineering at this point in time around how the site might be developed. The only planning that we've done is a concept plan, which was shared with councillors in the meeting of August 2023 when the original decision was made, and it's further shared as an attachment to the report tonight. But we haven't done any detailed engineering design. We've just proven concept, essentially proven that what we're seeking to achieve on behalf of the community can be achieved, and that's the delivery of the amenities, the parking and the roadways. But yeah, there's no detailed engineering which backs that up.
Yeah, thank you. It still causes me some concern, that engineering side of getting people in and out of there without us seeing any plans whatsoever. So they are potentially our neighbours, and you know, it would be nice to know that we could work collaboratively together to get a good outcome from that. Because if this motion gets up, by doing so, we may lose some of the amenity in the fact of vegetation along that strip of land, and that to me is an important part of that whole development as well. So perhaps as good neighbours, we could work together on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Janus. Councillor Hughes?
Just one quick question, kind of in the same theme there. If engineering came back and there was an X amount of subdivision that was ever potentially in that area, and it proved that that way is not deemed appropriate for the subdivision itself, they would have to go down the track of a separate access way to the property. Would that be right?
So thank you, Councillor Hughes. I'm looking over at Director Havercroft at this stage, because really we're delving now into what would be the development of the owner's existing site and how that might look and what the engineering conditions might be on that. And I'll speak, and then maybe perhaps one of the two directors can come in. So my understanding, we haven't had any plans at this stage for the adjacent site, so we don't know how they would be, how the site might perhaps be developed. But if the plans were submitted to council, then they would go through the normal process, which would include an engineering referral through to the engineering team, and they would then establish what are the appropriate suite of conditions to be applied to that permit specifically to allow them to proceed with the development of their land. It would be at that stage when the engineering design was developed for the adjacent plot that we would really understand what their intent was, and the engineering conditions would then make sure that that was was operable, you know, and worked in conjunction with the plot next to it.
Any other queries? Councillor Hughes? No, thank you. My only query is, if this does go ahead, who actually maintains the carriageway? Because I'm assuming eventually 50%, at least 50% or more of the movements across that carriageway will be to the developed site, not to the car park site. So is that a negotiating chip or not?
So thank you, Councillor Forsyth. My understanding, and this perhaps isn't the answer you want to hear, is that anything which sits on council's title is council's responsibility to maintain.
Right. I think you've actually answered it. Councillor Nicholas, any further?
Yep, I had another question about the capacity of Alpine Shire to manage the development on the easement. So there's an easement which allows access, but can we say the road has to be this wide, or there has to be trees planted on it as well, or what sort of management is there over on that land when the road or access is built?
Thank you, councillor. So, again, we're slightly stretching the limits of my understanding of easements at this point, but my understanding is council's obligation is to maintain the ability for the adjacent landowner to access with a vehicle across that boundary in the locations that will be shown on the plan of subdivision. Quite how that was maintained or delivered on council's side of the fence line would really be up to council, but they would be obliged to provide that access into the adjacent plot.
Any further queries? No. Okay then, we have three recommendations here. Could I please put these to the vote? Those in favour of those three recommendations, please raise your hand. Those against? We have it carried. Thank you. Moving on, 5.2, Director of Assets, Mr Alan Rees, Pulpunka Transfer Station cap construction. Thank you, Mr Rees.
Thank you, Councillor Forsyth. This report relates to a contract variation for the Pulpunka Landfill Rehabilitation Cap Construction Stage 2. In order to finalise these works relating to the cap construction, it's a requirement to build or to complete the works to the standard set out by the EPA. Unfortunately, due to unforeseen additional scope and latent conditions that were encountered during excavation, a further $169,299 is required to complete this work to that particular standard. The main reason for this additional cost is related to waste that was discovered that needed to be relocated and some other associated matters that could not have been foreseen at the time of the original contract being awarded. The additional funding, this variation will require an additional $30,000 to be approved by council, which will be unbudgeted, i.e. above and beyond the adopted budget for this project. These unbudgeted expenditure can be funded from our waste reserve. And I suppose in conclusion, the works are in progress. The contractor is on site. We need to meet the EPA's standards, and it is recommended that council adopts the recommendations as put forward.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. Seconded. Councillor Hughes. Councillor Nicholas.
As Mr Rees has pointed out, we have to manage municipal waste to EPA standards, and I guess the real secret is to reduce. So keep that in mind, everybody. And this had to come to council because of the unbudgeted nature, so I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
No, nothing further to add. Thank you.
Okay. Any commentary? Councillor Janus?
Of course. If he can get his thing on. Okay. Just a couple of questions, Mr Rees. Does this cap drainage incorporate the runoff and the drainage off the site into appropriate catchment areas, so to speak?
Thank you, Councillor Janus. Yes, indeed. So the purpose of this work is to actually create a waterproof cover for the waste underneath it, and the associated works allow the water to be drained away and captured appropriately, which is just as normal rainwater runoff. The main objective is to keep the waste dry so that we avoid oxidation under the cap.
Right. And it might be a question I noticed, but you may know it. How much have we got in the waste reserve?
I'm afraid I'll have to take that on notice. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it is in the order of, I think, $2 to $3 million at this point in time, which is a reserve set aside to be able to manage the rehabilitation of our landfills.
Yeah, we very rarely draw on that, I would assume.
Thank you, Councillor Janus. So we draw on the waste reserve to complete a range of tasks. We have a landfill monitoring program, which is funded out of the reserve. This involves the monitoring of boreholes on old landfills and active transfer stations, looking at leachate and gaseous emissions. And the results of those monitoring programs then informs the capital works that need to be completed in order to rehabilitate and manage the landfills responsibly in accordance with EPA standards. And so that reserve then funds the capital works that are being undertaken to complete the CAP construction. So the waste reserve is a crucial part of our funding model to be able to manage our waste responsibilities.
And I understand it's a statutory reserve, it can only be used for those purposes.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Councillor Nicholas, any further? No? Thank you. Let's put those three recommendations to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Thank you. Carried. 5.2.2, this is also a contract for the transfer station upgrade.
Apologies,
Retaining
Mr.
wall.
Mayor, can I interrupt? Was that a unanimous vote? Or
Was unanimous. There was a lag.
I just didn't know if it was a delay or not.
There's a lag, a delay.
A delay?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was unanimous.
Thank you.
2 hours ahead, behind.
Thank you. Put your hand up now, Councillor Hughes. All right, 5.2.2, contract transfer station, also in Porepunkah. Mr. Rees.
Thank you, Mayor. So this report also relates to a variation on a different contract, and it again is to enable the completion of works at the Porepunkah transfer station relating to the construction of a retaining wall and a concrete slab referred to as the Porepunkah loading dock. Council awarded a contract to Narborough Curb Limited in order to construct this concrete slab and retaining wall in September 2023. Again, latent conditions have been encountered, a greater extent of waste than what had previously been anticipated from previous surveys, and also the need to upgrade the handrail at the top of the retaining wall to meet current building code standards. So it's a safety-related matter. In order to complete these works, a variation to the value of $109,975 is recommended. And this amount includes an overspend of unbudgeted funds of $50,457. And again, these amounts can be funded from the Council's waste reserve. So it is recommended that Council considers the recommendations as put forward to approve the variation to this contract.
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Janus. Seconded, Councillor Nicholas. Councillor Janus.
I think the conversation, as per the previous motion, probably is relevant to this as much as to the previous one, but I certainly understand having those safety rails on top of that, because it is if somebody falls into those big holes that contain all sorts of things, it could be catastrophic, and that needs to happen. Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholas.
Nothing to add.
Nothing to add. Councillor Hughes. Nothing to add. Okay then, so I'm going to put this to the vote. Those in favour, would you please raise your hands? Thank you. I waited. And that was carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And I think that there being no further business, I declare this meeting closed at 5:26.